Hey, everybody, how's everybody doing today? So it's almost lunch and I'm not right before your lunch, so don't blame me. But just to make sure you guys are here, I want to do a little exercise with you. So I'm going to say some words and I want you to say secured. You hear me? Secured. Say it back to me one time. All right, so here we go. I am. You are. We're all. So let's go get. No, it was ice cream. I thought we could all go leave and get ice cream. But that's a lot of times how our users feel. We set up these patterns and then we do a switch. So that's what I want to talk about today, how to bring some of the factors and things that I've learned from user experience and user design really into the world of security awareness. So let's get into it. So I can admit I am a resident nerd, and not like in your Dungeons and Dragons kind of way. Like I played Sims coming up and built my own computer and installed a CD-ROM. And I remember floppy disks, we had to fold down the thing to get it to work, right? So for me, I focus on really what comes next. I'm a futurist. I love explaining and understanding what happens in the next 5 to 10 years of your organization, of your industry, of career paths, of different workforces, different generations. So I try to look at what and how signals and drivers of change will impact the future. I focus on technology transformation. Stephanie was explaining I have a background in product management. So I look at technology systems like Facebook and Instagram and the tools that you use to keep notes. I'm often driving those kind of conversations with the stakeholders to understand what are the users' needs, what are their priorities, and really most importantly, what are the jobs that they are trying to get done to remove as many roadblocks as I can to make sure the product is successful and that it's in as many hands as possible. And then lastly, I am an adjunct professor at Bradley University, where I'm teaching around UI UX, mostly from a research standpoint, focusing on human-computer interaction, helping to articulate the psychology of what users are trying to get at. So really what I've learned in all my time is that humans behave weird. We establish patterns, we do things wonky ways. You put on our right shoe before we put on our pants and our shirt and then our belt and then our shoes, right? We always try to change it up. And then for some reason, we have the belief that the Princess Amunda wants to give us $5 million. Like, that's not how it works. And so, oh, you need my social security number? Okay, I'll give it to you. It's, 572, like, and a lot of times, like, who wants to order their pizza by having to call? Like, anybody remember movie phone? You had to call a number to get times for a movie and then figure out if you want to go and listen, and you missed the time, you had to start all over again. So it's like there are systems that we have in place that a lot of times we don't remember. One perfect example of this is I saw a TikTok recently because TikTok taught me everything. It's a child was concerned because a parent said, "Hey, why are you saying roll up the window? I just pressed the button." Think about that for a second. We colloquialize terms and they become part of our nomenclature and our culture based on legacy versions of how the process used to be done. And how often do we do that in our organizations? The way things used to be done still becomes the nomenclature, even though it's advanced a little bit in the technology. So with that, I want to talk about what is UX and what is UI. So I'm going to shout out who knows what UI is. Just shout it out. Perfect. Okay, now what is UX? Who knows the difference? Okay, so at a high level, right, UX answers 4 questions. 1, how do people interact with technology? And by that, I mean, is it a software? Is it a website? Is it, a Tamagotchi? Like, what is the interaction mode and method that we want our users to implicate and connect with this technology, right? How do different people learn and receive information, right? For example, Facebook used to be only for college students. Now it's for everyone and their great grandmother, right? It's exploded, it's changed context. So understanding who your audience is absolutely critical to the success of any digital experience. Thirdly, we want to talk about how to create positive digital experiences. I can't say that I've seen one person say they've had a positive experience on the IRS website. No one wants to do that. So we look at things like we want to invite people in. One example I just used earlier was when you go to TikTok, especially first time, they didn't make you create an account. I don't know if anyone noticed that. It was come on in, watch these couple videos, like it, share it, see what you like, share with us what your interests are, right? it opened up the floodgate. You create an account much later on. It would keep track of who you shared your data with. It would keep track of who your friends were. Like, hey, you want to connect your contacts? Like, it was inviting and opening and say, come on in, have a seat, stay for a few hours, and then look up and realize you got no work done today because you were on TikTok all day. So again, and then how do we foster those desired behaviors and patterns, right? Because TikTok also introduced a new process. I mean, they continued the process that we're familiar with, right? That vertical scroll. We're constantly scrolling. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of this is just in this parallax format of visual stimulation. You keep scrolling, you keep getting surprised, right? We talk about the idea of our brain is connected to getting a reward every time a desired action is completed. If anyone's familiar with the hooked model. So we talk about, oh, every time my phone buzzes, I get a variable reward. That same scroll, the surprise of what comes next, because you don't fully know. So what does UI UX have anything to do with cybersecurity awareness? And I will tell you in a fun little story. So I have a colleague who owns a cloud transformation business, and he, had many clients and working with them for years. And one client out of the blue just stopped paying. And I'm mindful of the edge here. And he said, a few months went by, didn't hear anything. The client typically paid on time. There had been no issues in the past. So they weren't sure what was going on. So he finally called up the CEO and said, hey, our company hasn't received, any of our invoices for the last 5 months or so, 4 months or so. What's going on? Mind you, this is like $750,000 we're talking about here. So that's a lot of money. Come to find out, the CEO responded, let me find out what's going on. They talked to the head of accounting. They said, oh yeah, about 3.5 months ago, we got an email wanting to change the routing address for the account so we can send the money to. So our team processed that and we've been paying all the invoices ever since. CEO was confused. He didn't request to change the routing. Their bank account didn't change. So what could have happened? Someone, a threat actor, created a spoof email address, found the signature that looked just like their company's, and sent over a request to change the routing number on the account so that the company would pay him instead of the actual company that was delivering these services. So when we talk about this example, that's a lot of money that's gone missing. But when you think about it, those requests, those patterns come in every single day. If you're an accounts receivable person, all you do is process invoices. Nothing about this alarmed that person. There may not have been additional processes or steps or verification needed. Like, they do this all day long. So I say all of this and the previous things to say is that the same way in the example this morning, we talk about patterns. I think Cassie mentioned it yesterday morning around we have these neural pathways for processes and then we build new ones on top of them. So what UI UX really does, really focuses on driving and deciding what design patterns are our users going to leverage today in order to accomplish this task. When you open TikTok, you know you're going to scroll vertically. If something happens and they suddenly change it to horizontal and they change the pattern on you, you're going to be what? Flustered, confused, outraged. Like, this is completely different. I don't know what to do. You get instantly frustrated. So in the example, I just offered you guys all free ice cream and you messed it up because I changed the pattern at the very end. We did it 3-4 times one way and then, something different. So that's a thing we need to be mindful when we're talking about bringing UI UX principles into the world of security awareness. So here's the fun part. So I'm going to break down 3 different toolkits that you all can leverage when bringing some of these tools in. So the first one is personas. I know it's been mentioned a couple of times today, but I'm going to talk to you guys about how to build a persona. Secondly is around emotional and journey maps. And the third one is a really cool one that I love around adoption psychology. So let's dig in. So I love this little GIF because it articulates the difference between a persona and a target audience. Personas are personal. That's why it starts with persona, right? It captures the functional who as a representative of an audience, of a group of people. So for example, if I have, my privileged access users, right? My account admins, these may be represented by, Bob Thornton, who is the, he's over, identity access management, right? He has access to all of the systems. He and others like him throughout their organization have a high level of clearance. Therefore, what are the components that we know about these people? Okay, they're highly technical. We could assume they're of a certain age demographic. We can assume all of this should be data driven, right? So as you look at all of your groups, start to look for these 4 characters, right? The behaviors, the attitudes, the motivations, and the needs of each one of these kind of groups that you are then personalizing into one representative individual. So then when your security awareness team or even for the company as wide, you're having a conversation and you're talking about your campaign, your strategies, your learning objectives for the year or quarter, you can then go back and say, well, hey, Bob Thornton may not respond well to this because of X. So let's consider putting in a different mode of communication. Let's think about doing a physical and a digital engagement for this particular training based on what this persona may need or may be interested in. And then of course, we talked about the different types of personas, like Bob as an identity access management lead, or a vendor, or a new employee. What are the things that they need, and what can we look for connective tissue between the different types of new employees that you might have? They could be of a certain age range, they could be of a certain background, they could be seasoned employees, they can be all these different things. So we can start to gather this data around the training audience that you have org-wide and start to kind of narrow them into lanes and then create these representative personas. Now, mind you, this is not a set it and forget it exercise. This is something you have to continually evolve in your organization. And I think you'll start to see some patterns as to who's coming into the organization, who's transitioning out of the organization. And then if you're really advanced, you can start to create your training programs around these personas. Because if you have a holistic view of the organization as far as role, access, and different departments that you need to train against, especially when you look at your criteria and your regulatory requirements, you can then start to shape your training around this and start to evolve your people as your organization grows. The second one I want to talk a little bit about is the emotional journey map. So this is the fun part. Once you build your persona, then you can then document the process of your campaign, your strategies, everything that you're doing. And so it's really 2 simple processes a part of each journey map. First one are what we call touch points. Every digital and physical interaction that your training audience has with your campaign should be documented as a touch point. If it's an email around, here's the new training you have to take. If it's a card in the lunchroom, tabletop cards in the lunchroom, if you're having an exercise, if you have any sort of physical activity or event, so you have a weird, escape room for your campaign, right? All of these should be documented as touch points and then measured against each persona. Because then what you're able to do is identify the channels of communication that you have inside of each campaign. And then you can also understand how the user starts to feel. And this is the second bucket, which is the emotional journey, as distributed here, the green smiley face, the yellow meh, and the red sad face. So for example, if you have a phishing campaign, people may not be too happy if they don't click it or get it right the first time and they have to go to an additional training, right? But when you start to map the emotional journey, and usually this can come in form of a feedback survey after the experience, as you start to collect this data, then you can start to have opportunities and ways to refine some of the campaigns that you're launching year over year, quarterly or annually based on your goals, right? So having the phases defined, all the touch points defined, as well as the emotional state as the user is going through this journey, you can actually capture a lot of data and use that to inform future iterations of your program. And the third one is, how many of you have been in the middle of a training, online training, and the button stopped working, or you can't click to the next thing, or the video stops, right? We've all felt that, right? This is what we talk about. So adoption psychology is, if I'm building TikTok for the first time, just as an example, and I want to introduce it to a new market, what are the ways in which I can get my users, my target audience, and my personas engaged, enmeshed, right? Addicted to this new technology, this new platform. How do I do that? For TikTok, they chose children, right? It was a kids app at the very start. So that was how they introduced it. Their parents got a hold of it, teenagers got a hold of it, their siblings, and then it just blew to a worldwide phenomenon. So when you think about adoption psychology, think about 2 things. One, think about the technology and the platforms that your trainings are being delivered through. Are there pain points there? Do people have a hard time clicking through, getting through the training? Are there difficulties that are stopping the users from actually being able to learn because they're blocked by the technology. And then also think about the different channels and the modes in which you communicate and you bring people into this training environment as you introduce this space, right? So really try to find and remove all barriers to changing the behavior the way that you would like them to be changed. So that's what all psychology adoption is all about. So now we know the what. Here's the fun part. So I'm gonna talk to you guys a little bit about the how to drive into each one of these sections. So there are 4 types of personas: goal-directed personas, role-based personas, engaging personas, and fictional personas. And it's really important to understand which persona type is best for your organization. We'll walk through the details, but I will say this: personas are not for the faint of heart, because it really brings to bear the weight of all of the different personality types, the learning types, the communication styles. It brings all of this to bear in your organization. One example of a persona that may be different than others, maybe you have a persona that represents the board. Maybe you have a persona that represents the C-suite. Maybe you have a board that represents if you have a labor force outside of the HQ, the labor force that needs to be trained against certain things, right? So start to think of those capacities and think about the persona types that you can bring in. So the first one is the most obvious, I think the most applicable, would be the goal-directed persona. So this really focuses on what does security desire for this user to do, and how does the security desire for this person to accomplish it? So we look at the persona, we look at the scenario, and we look at the goal, right? So if it's a phishing, if it's a identity access, if it's password management, whatever the topic and theme of the training is, you have to ask yourself, in the persona that I've created for the different roles and access types in my organization, does this persona type fit my organization and allow me to communicate to my stakeholders, to my team, and broader to the organization, clear goals that we want them to accomplish? And this will be a certain type of persona that allows you to document not only the persona details, but what the objective is for the year, for the 6 months. You can do this long or short term. Second one is role-based. A lot of organizations use this, really focus on data-driven, understanding what focuses a user role on the organization to align system needs to users within the organization. So again, you have a VP level, your VP persona would make sense. They typically have the same level of access. They may communicate the same. They may have similar backgrounds, right? You can pull details around these individuals to create a collective representative individual, and that may help you shape your training for, your spear phishing campaign, right? Or your whaling campaign. As you think about higher levels or lower levels in the organization, your training needs are different, so then your personas can reflect those levels. Thirdly is engaging. So this is not so much focused on the role or what the goal is. It talks about how do I encompass everyone. So this is almost like the DE&I of personas. It's like, okay, let's take a look at their emotions. How do the users feel about taking this password training? How do they feel about learning about risk management, right? Help them understand how to engage them as a whole person. One example of this could be, if we talk about passwords, maybe talking about how to teach their kids safe password habits. If you have a workforce that has, you can research shows that a lot of them have children, teaching the parent how to protect their children in an online space means most likely they'll also take a listen to that as well and absorb from that, right? So how do I engage you as a whole person and care about what you care about, so that when I'm educating and informing, I actually am coming from a place that is empathetic at heart and allows you to really receive what I'm saying because it's coming from a place of empathy. And then fictional. This is the one exception to the rule. To me, this is the most fun, because then your incident response team, the security awareness team, right, all of the cybersecurity teams can come together and say, hey, who do we think? Like, who do we think is using this tool? Who do we think needs training? Who do we think is messing up, right? How do we do this, right? So this is a fictional persona that is not research-based, as all the rest are, and allows you to document your own assumptions, allows you to document who you think is using this tool and what you think they need. And then as you prepare the other fact-based personas and compare them to your fictional personas, you almost have this kind of way to navigate and shape and bring in or shape the components of each persona. So this is actually super important. So here we go. There are a lot of steps here, but I'll break it down as quickly as I can. Firstly, research. Who's in your organization? What threats is your organization facing, right? Are we having more phishing? Are we having more ransomware? Like, what are the types of threats happening in my organization's environment? And who are the users that need to be trained against certain threats that are happening in the landscape? So document and capture all of this information, and think demographic data as well. All of this pertains to how people learn, how people communicate, and what people value, which will be really important in building the persona. Second one is scope. And when I say that, I look at those 4 different types, understanding how much or how little work do we have time to build these personas and commit to evolving the personas year over year, things of that nature. Third one are start to design the scenarios in which your persona will behave. So looking at your training requirements, your training objectives for the year, what are the scenarios that you're creating for the users, and how do you create those with those personas in mind? So start to document this effort, because it'll help you fill in details around how the personas should behave. Especially if you're doing goal-based personas, you have to define the scenario in which they have a goal to complete. The fourth point is touch points. As I mentioned earlier, the touch points are every interaction that you have with your trainees, like every interaction that you have, physical, virtual, whatever you may have, you document them as a touch point, and then you can start to capture feedback on how the user felt going through that particular training or campaign experience. The fifth one is user intentions. So this is fun because you really get a chance to discern the difference between what you, the security professional, wants the user to intend to do versus what the user intends to do. So for an example, if I have a phishing simulation, and of course, we intend the user to report it as spam, right? The user wants to do their work. They don't think about this, right? So I think a lot of times, in the same way the UX is, the whole focus is not on what we want, is to remove blockages for you to do your job. In this case, we want to make it easy, intuitive, and train them in such a way that we understand their intentions are to get their work done. Once we know that, that may shift how we present certain simulations, certain training experiences, and things of that nature. So that's really important. And then put it all together, right? Start to document your different learning styles, the different age demographics, different roles in the organization, different levels of access. Pull all these together, understand their motivations, understand if they, have a family, understand if they like to go skiing on the weekends. Some of this information is germane because it does articulate the person as a whole. And as you understand that and incorporate that into your strategies, it'll really start to shape. So if you have, for example, a large population go skiing, maybe in ski season, you do a campaign about digital security in that space, right? Or you use that as a theme for that year, right? You can incorporate some of these interests into your personas based on level, based on access, and then you can use those in your campaigns. And then the seventh one we talked about in the journey map, understand the emotional state, understanding if people are generally, maybe technology forward, maybe they're a laggard, right? You can start to assemble your own metrics around personality. Are they tech leaning? Are they more analog, right? Do they lean more towards security? Or they lean more technical? They lean more soft skills, right? You can start to build your own kind of Likert scales of personality assessments for each persona that will also help you determine their communication style, their learning style, and how the best to communicate to them. And then lastly is personas are growing and evolving. So review and document your recommendations. So as you establish your personas, as you launch your next campaign, do a feedback survey and start to capture data and break it down by the personas and use this data to inform and evolve your personas as you go. So phase 2, we talk about the journey map. And this is pretty simple. Again, the journey map involves the persona. It's a simple formula. The persona meets the experience, and then you are able to understand their emotional response to the experience based on the persona. So it all connects. So one, define your journey phases. A very simple way to look at this is pre-assessment or pre-campaign, pre-training, whatever your process is. In the middle of your process, you deploy your campaign, you deploy your training, and then post-training. So what was the behavior beforehand? What was the behavior doing? And what was the behavior after? And you document all of the steps in your process that this persona is going to go through. And that may differ. You may have a different experience lined up for, say a level 7 in your organization, just to give random numbers, versus level 9, depending on their access, depending on who they are in the org. So then you can separate the users and then create different touch points based on their needs. Then you document the touch points, and then you document the pain points. So after you deliver the survey, you are able to capture the feedback of the user's feelings during that particular campaign. And then you'll have learning opportunities for that campaign that you just administered. So then you can see both the pre-behavior, the post-behavior, and how they felt about going through that training as a whole. But one thing I actually didn't specify, journey maps come in 2 states. You have your current state, which is where you currently are, and then you have your future state. So the process is the same, but here's the beautiful thing. After you've captured your pain points and recommendations on, say, a phishing simulation, you can move into building a future state journey map on how your next phishing simulation campaign will go based on the feedback. So you capture that data, you tie it into your personas, you document the emotional journey, and then you use those recommendations to improve how you expect the next session of this particular training to go based on how you've informed the personas. So where do we go from here? So here's the fun part. Take these easy steps, right? Identify the high-risk user roles based on the organizational level, department, or permissions to create personas. That's the one easy one you can do. Filter your people and see what kind of personas you can build from there. Second one, chart the learning journey and define the learning objectives for different personas and explore their pain points. And you can easily deploy a anonymous survey to capture their general thoughts about training, their general thoughts about training, security awareness, what kind of behaviors do they currently exhibit. You can capture this data and use it to inform your personas. And then thirdly, leverage adoption strategy to build new habits. So ask the people how they feel about your current LMS. Consider these feedback and these maybe limitations in your current systems to feed and inform future versions, right? Maybe the contract is coming up. This is a great way for you to bring all of that data to bear and really say, hey, this particular tool set is inhibiting or enhancing the learning that our platform is able to deliver. Thank you so very much for everything. I left a few minutes for questions, but I do want to say one amazing thing. This QR code, I've actually taken the time to create templates and downloadable one-pagers as an extension to this talk. So all of the steps, everything you need to know, plus really cool templates on how to actually drive these in your organization. Print it out, fill it out with personas, fill it out with your journey map, and it's actually designed for security professionals. So it should be really easy for you guys to bring this into your organization. So any questions you have, there's a FAQ section on the page. I'll be sure to capture this and my answer and document it on the page. So continue to check the page because it'll update as we get new questions. Thank you guys so very much.